Welcome everyone. We'll just give a minute for those joining virtually and then we'll kick off. Great. So I'll kick off the webinar and good afternoon and welcome to this webinar, which is part of a series here at Carter Murray, each addressing different topics and areas of interest in the current marketing, business development and communications professional services market. Thank you to those who are joining the call, wherever you are. You may or may not be aware that Carter Murray is a specialist marketing recruitment agency, part of the wider SR Group, and we cover marketing, communications, business development, digital roles across professional services, which is today, but also financial services, commerce and industry. And we also cover regions across the UK, UAE, Germany, Singapore, and Australia. We have a team here within professional services covering the assistant to senior executive level, Charlotte Lee and Keely Brown, so do also connect after this webinar. Today, we are so very fortunate to have some impressive panel of leading marketing, BD and comms experts discussing the key topic of how to get promoted to manager in this evolving market and also offer career advice for the future of professional services, BD, marketing and communications professionals. My name is Hannah Taylor and I've worked at Carter Murray for 12 years covering the professional services market throughout this time and have helped place and career coach individuals throughout their careers and feel quite passionate about providing quality service to clients and candidates over the long term, and hence this topic being a real key area for offering advice. I'm very much looking forward to our experts' insights. I'll now hand over to my colleague Mark, who works alongside me here at Carter Murray.
Hello, so I'm Mark Harris. You can pretty much ditto what Hannah said, except I'm a lot older and a lot uglier, unfortunately. So I've been here for 4 years, done about 15 years of marketing and BD recruitment within professional services. Something I really enjoy, something that challenges us every day, and definitely an area that this kind of topic comes up quite often. So really looking forward to asking the questions to the panel and hearing what they've got to say.
Amazing. And thank you to all of the panel for taking part today and sharing your insights. I hope you enjoy the webinar and find real value from it. If at any point you have a question, please send through to our Q&A section. But without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our panel to introduce themselves. Charlotte Sampson, over to you.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you to you and Mark for your very kind invitation to join you today. I started my career at major global corporates, British Airways, Xerox, so got a really good grounding, quality of training. They very much encourage early responsibility. I've moved agency side and actually moved into law. I was headhunted by one of my law firm clients. It was a regional law firm. So that's how I moved into the legal sector. And I've been in the legal sector now for the best part of about 18 years, moving from regional firms up to major, global law firms such as Hogan Lovells. I'm now currently at Dechert, where I am Associate Director of PR and Communications for EMEA. So I cover everywhere outside of the Americas. And I'm currently growing my team.
On to Rebecca.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca, so thank you very much for having me. I'm currently Head of Marketing at GPE, and for those of you who don't know who GPE is what was known as Great Portland Estates, which is a real estate investment trust or property developer. I have been in real estate for 12, 13 years now, working both at GPE and before this for a long run at a firm called British Land. I actually started my career in media and worked my way through media agencies, moved across to then a full service marketing agency where I learned kind of a lot about what marketing can do and actually the amazing things that there are within that career. And since then I've kind of worked my way up sideways, left, right, centre, through organisations like British Land to get to the position I'm in today.
And on to Giles.
Thanks very much. Hello, I'm Giles Daubeny. Lovely to be here today. So I've spent 25 years in professional services. I started my career not in marketing, but as a research analyst at a strategy consultancy called McKinsey. And then I moved sideways into marketing and business development. So I've worked in big law. So I was at Hogan Lovells, not when Charlotte was there, and Clifford Chance. I've worked for a city law firm, RPC, and Big Four accountancy. So I was at PwC for nearly 8 years. Most recently, I've been at Bird & Bird, international law firm. I've been here for nearly 4 years. Up until a few weeks ago, I was global head of client service and insight. I've just taken on a new role as global head of sector and client development. So I'm bringing together our firm's global client and sector strategies.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So look, let's jump into the first question. So, excuse me. One of the things that I think is quite apparent from a recruitment point of view is when people tell us that they want to step up to manager, and we push them a little bit on it. Sometimes we're not always, people aren't always sure why they want to step up to manager. So I think a good place to probably start is why do people want to become a manager, and what is a manager? So Giles, let's start with you. What were the biggest changes in day-to-day roles that you've seen from your team when they've transitioned into manager roles, or even yourself when you transitioned?
It's a long time ago, Mark, so I might have to talk about my team's experiences. I think the day-to-day changes for my team when they've been promoted are probably less about what they're doing. Although as a manager, you will inevitably take on additional tasks, maybe more responsibility, most obviously, becoming a people manager. I think it's more about how they then perform that role. And the how is really driven, I think, by a shift in expectations from partners. And with that, I think, is the amount of time that my managers spend with senior stakeholders. And that's often the case when they've previously been sort of supervised by a senior, and now effectively they are managing a particular group on their own with support from an exec. And I think that increase in time with partners means you're no longer just expected to be, an order taker. Although I'd say, the ability to sort of execute, deliver, get stuff done is still absolutely critical. But you'll start to spend a bit more time actually advising stakeholders, so helping to sort of set the strategic direction for the groups you're managing, using your expertise and experience to share some insight, to bring some new ideas for how we drive reputation, relationships, revenue, and so on. I qualify all of that by saying, at Bird & Bird, we're actually really proud of the sort of success we've had creating career paths within our MBD team, and really encouraging people to sort of fulfill their potential at the firm. And we only really promote people who have a demonstrable track record of operating at that level above, so for a reasonable length of time. So juniors in my team stepping up to manager usually don't notice that bigger shift, that bigger change, because effectively they've already been doing that job for a decent amount of time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so they're almost earning the right to become the manager because they're doing it already.
Exactly right.
And I presume that's something that you build over a period of time, is it, where you're slowly integrating them more and more with the partners?
Yeah, exactly. So you don't have that massive step because you've been transitioning into that role over time. You've been setting, stretch objectives. So actually, when it comes to it, effectively, you have been doing that role for 3, 6, 9 months.
Yeah, really good, really helpful. And Charlotte, what about from your point of view? What do you see the main skill or knowledge that these candidates in this level need to work on to make that step up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to say I agree with everything Giles has said. Hopefully it's not such a massive jump because they're already they've already taken on those responsibilities and they're kind of doing that role day to day anyway. I think it can be really challenging sometimes to get that first managerial title per se, because you need somebody who has trust in you and confidence in you and to give you that opportunity. I think the very best way that somebody who wants to become manager can do that is really by excelling in their current role and doing their existing job brilliantly and consistently. And there's a really excellent clip I saw on LinkedIn, and it's an interview with Barack Obama, and he talks about just getting the job done, being known as somebody who your boss, or your partner, if they give something to you, they know that you will do an excellent job, it will be delivered on time, it'll be done to budget, you are properly solid performer. I think no one is perfect, so focus on those little things. Don't let typos, missing deadlines trip you up. Deliver your job. And I think he talks about getting the job done. He talks about whatever is assigned to you, just nailing it. So I think that is key. And the second thing I'd say, I think everybody is different in terms of their skill set. So someone might need to work on their writing skills. Someone else might need to work on how they interact with, colleagues or partners. But I think ask your manager for feedback is probably what I'd recommend. Listen to what they have to say, take on board that feedback, and then even ask your manager about opportunities. How are you going to develop those skills? And then with your manager, you can actually plot that path, develop those skills to get you to that manager level.
And is there anything in particular that you see that's the big difference when they make that step up? Because obviously when people make that step up, it quite often gives them more confidence and more ability. So is there something that any particular knowledge or skills that stand out for you?
I think nailing your current job, so that's delivering everything on time. I think there's something about communications with stakeholders. So whether that's partners, whether that's your boss, keeping them informed of what you're doing. If there's a delay in anything, you are proactively going to them and saying, I've come across this issue, this is how I'm dealing with it, this is why there's a bit of a delay. So the partner knows and can trust that you are absolutely on this and you're managing it, you're running it. I think to Giles's point, it's showing, initiative, taking full ownership of projects. I think Giles made the point about you're not just taking instructions now, you are actually stepping up and you are, engaging, you're coming to the table with ideas. So I do think you'll have more responsibility, more visibility as well.
So it's almost like a bit of the theme already of focus on what you're doing at the moment rather than what you want to be doing and that next step, because if you can get that right, you're naturally moving into the next progression anyway. Rebecca, what from your point of view, any examples you can give that you see that the specific tasks or projects that they do that differ?
I think it kind of probably depends on the organization and the management role they're going into. So I think it's worth kind of saying that you can be a manager without managing people, depending on your organization. Mm-hmm. So that might be that you're in charge of larger projects, or if I take the live perspective of GPE where we are now, I expect my managers to hold the whole 360 plan when it comes to marketing. So whereas when you maybe are at a lower level, you might be looking after particular elements within that project. So you may be in charge of the comm strategy, you might be delivering the social media strategy, you may be the one that's working with the brand agency. When you're the manager, especially on my team and teams that I've had previously, you're kind of accountable for the entire end-to-end process. So you will probably find that you are then accountable for all the little bits of that project that potentially other people in the team had been doing. You may potentially be stepping up and managing the people on your team. Even if you're not their direct boss or their direct manager, it may be, that you're utilising a live example of the events manager that works within the same department to work on part of that project for you. So I think from my perspective, managers are more accountable is probably what I think is the biggest step change. And I think both Charlotte and Giles have kind of nailed it as well. You're not only delivering your role, you're delivering your role to the best of your ability, always striving to go over and above. But you need to remember that the accountability probably now is sitting on your shoulders versus your boss's shoulders. And that can be a massive change for people, because if you're quite used to being part of a team and, you know, there always being somebody else that might have the ultimate responsibility for ensuring it's on time, on budget, at that manager level, your team around you will be expecting you to be the one that steps up to that. So sometimes that can be quite a lot to take on when you first start doing it.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point that you made when. And it's not always the same in every other industry, but when you in professional services, you become manager. It doesn't mean you're managing people all the time. A lot of the time you're managing an area, which I presume then means that you tend to have a lot more, a lot less safety shields above you in terms of your management, because you're having a lot more direct contact with the senior stakeholders and partners.
Yeah, massively. And I think depending on, you know, we're lucky as a real estate industry, we actually have multiple products within it. So you can quite easily manage an entire product without having much interference, which is great if you're somebody that likes autonomy, you like to be able to drive strategic decisions. But what that does mean is that actually you'll be the person that's out there with, you know, our head of flex or our head of leasing, and really understanding that and building those relationships with all the other parties that there is to kind of get these marketing plans delivered.
Yeah, and I think that leads us quite nicely on to the next question, Charlotte. So obviously, one of the interesting things about professional services is working in a partnership environment a lot of the time. And as we all know, partners can be the loveliest of people, but they can be particularly challenging. So how do you go about gaining this? If you're stepping up to manager and you're having a lot more face time with these stakeholders, how do you go about gaining and developing the relationships with these senior stakeholders and these partners?
I think that's it's such an important part if you are to succeed in professional services. I think you know, having, as you say, those relationships with the partners so that they trust you is really important. And one of the things I love about working in law firms is that I have to be at the top of my game every day. You know, law firm partners, they are incredibly bright, they are demanding, they're super busy. We have to meet those expectations every single day. So for me, that's something I really love. And in terms of how to do that and how to build that trust, I think it goes back to a point I made earlier about delivering excellent work consistently, having those partners know that they can trust you and that you will handle whatever it is that they have given you to do, that you're regularly feeding back to them how you're doing with this, that you're on the case, that you've looked at this, you're working on it. I think also, as well as communicating regularly with them, there's also something about thinking from their perspective and anticipating their needs. So if you know if something, you know, is coming up, thinking ahead to what is that partner going to need in order to make that happen? And is there something I can do to help them? So just being as thoughtful, as considerate, as helpful as you possibly can be, showing interest in their area, being curious, getting to know that practice, that market, their client base, and then doing all you can to help that partner succeed in, you know, winning that work, for example.
It's so different to all the other markets. So Cartamari do professional services, but we also pick up C&I and FS. And this market's so different because when you go into your role, you don't necessarily report to one person, do you? You'll have 10 different people asking you, and they're all more important than the last person that want you to do their thing better than that you did to the other one. So when we are asked to recruit, 99 times out of 100, they will only take people from professional services because it's so hard for these people to learn coming from the outside in of what it's like to be speaking to someone so important in the business that literally doesn't have the time of day a lot of the time for you because they should be billing their hours elsewhere.
Absolutely. I compare it to when I was working agency side and I had multiple clients. It's as though I'm doing an agency role in-house because all of my different practice areas, so I cover the whole of Decat's global practice area, so I cover everything. I'll never know the practice areas like those, those partners per se.
Yeah.
But because I cover everything, I have to have some insight into those business. So there's huge variety in the role. And again, I find that really, really interesting. And to your point about time, I think you're absolutely spot on. Respectful partner time. I won't book in a half-hour meeting. If I need 5 minutes, I book in 5 minutes with a partner. And I think they, and certainly the feedback I get is that they appreciate that. I'm not wasting their time. They're too busy.
Yeah. Perfect. And Rebecca, I'm keen to come to you on this question. For a senior female in a very male-dominated environment, how important is networking, building those internal relationships with stakeholders for you? And have you got kind of examples of where it's helped you in your career?
Yes. So first things I would say is it is probably, in my opinion, one of the most important. I think that there are very few industries where you can get particularly far or do particularly well if you don't have those relationships or good skills to do it. I think some of the things that I found really important, I've been quite lucky because of working both the businesses that I've been in for the last sort of 12, 13 years, or FTSE businesses. There has been a lot of investment into sort of into development and skills. So one of the things that I picked up quite early on was working with the Insights colours. If you don't know what your Insight colour is, I would definitely recommend going online and doing a short test to find out what you are. And actually, once you've found out that, it will tell you a lot about your style as an individual and how you work with other people and what your dislikes and likes are. And one of the things I learned early on in my career is it's always good to understand your stakeholders and how they like to be worked with. Because if you can make sure that you can adapt your working style at particular points in your career to work with those stakeholders, it will ensure that you have a much better relationship with them, which will help you get further. So some live examples. The real estate industry, yes, is very male dominated. It is actually probably more male dominated with slightly older gentlemen as well. And I've actually found through my career, especially at GPE, we have a lot of reds. And I'm quite lucky. I have a yellow personality with some red in it, so I can kind of work with them.
Just explain briefly what reds would mean.
So a red will be somebody that is probably quite strongly opinionated. They will want very short, sharp answers. They do not like waffle. They do not like you to go on for 24 hours. And in marketing, we can often be fluffy, as I'm told on times. I don't think you should ever change your personality to fit, but there's ways of making it work for these types of individuals. So I am used to people that would like an answer. They want the answer yesterday, and they're not always interested in how you get there. So it's always good to understand those stakeholders. A good example of how it's helped me is actually when I worked in an agency many, many moons ago, one of the clients that I worked with was a very senior gentleman who worked at British Land. And at the time I was working on a number of different customers. So I did everything from looking after a ferry company through to private schools, opticians, and heat pumps, if anyone's interested. And actually, we also did contract publishing for all the city portfolio that British Land owned. And actually, this very senior gentleman and I got on very, very well during our relationship. And one day they reached out to me and offered me my first managerial role working for British Land. So actually building that relationship ultimately gave me my leg up into what is now kind of a 13-year-long career within real estate. So.
And do you find that there are some relationships that are tougher to develop than others? And how would you deal with that?
Yes, there's always going to be some that are difficult. I think if you work in an organisation, especially one that's got more than maybe a handful of people, there are always going to be people that perhaps are managed differently to you, work differently to you, or have different personality sets. Me personally, I struggle more with the kind of very analytical types as a marketeer, and especially a very yellow marketeer. I'm quite on the spot. I like to think outside the box. I'm more likely to draw on the wall or on big pictures rather than sit down and put it in a spreadsheet. And therefore building those relationships is done in a slightly different way. So I have a very senior stakeholder now who, before every meeting we have, I will email him 5 days in advance. I will give him an agenda of what we're going to cover. I will prepare any materials in advance and send it through to him in that way. Because for him, he needs to sit down, analyze it, have a number of days to have dwelled on it. I can't get him in a room and get him to make an on-the-spot decision. And once you work out those things, it'll make your life easier, because if you go into a room with someone who is that type of analytical thinker, they won't give you a decision there and then, and you can then end up with two frustrated parties. So it's worth working it out.
Almost managing your own expectations before you come out of the meeting.
Exactly, because you've got to, a big thing about marketing is being able to think about, how do I get my stakeholders and my key customers to understand these messages and get it to the right place? And sometimes they're going to think differently to you. So working on that relationship will help you get there.
Perfect.
Can I just add really quickly to that one, if I may? I completely agree with Rebecca's points. On the like the personality profile, that's one of the things I was going to say. I found that hugely useful in terms of understanding myself and how I work and how I collaborate with other people, and also understanding other personality types. So to Rebecca's point, I would highly recommend DISC training, which is very similar to the colours, DISC. And there's another website that does a free version called 16 Personalities. Honestly, I've just found it absolutely brilliant to understand how best to work with others and get the best out of people in my team.
Out of interest, Charlotte, how easy is it to then get the partners to buy into that kind of thing?
Tell me what you mean, as in get them to do the training?
Get them to do the like things like the disc and the colours. Do they get involved in that as well?
To be honest with you, you probably don't need them to, because when you look at the different types, you can see quite clearly, as Rebecca said, a red, which is equivalent to a D on the DISC system. It gives you the description of that characteristic and the behaviours of that individual. So if you look at, for the DISC profile, the 4 different sets of personalities and their characteristics, you can very quickly match your partner to one of those personality profiles. So it's, to Rebecca's point, do they think slowly? Are they, they take their time, they ponder, or are they fast-paced on it? We want action, we want it now. So it's really, really worth looking at. You don't need them to do it. You'll be able to map them quite quickly, I think. And just on your point about networking as well, again, I completely agree. Networking has been so important to me in my career. I've actually got my last 3 roles at major global law firms because I've been approached by the firm. I don't even think the roles were advertised.
You're not helping us here, Charlotte.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. There is a role for Cartamari, absolutely. However, I think, in terms of some of the things I've done, I've been on committees for the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, on the Ethics Committee, Corporate and Financial Group. That's given, while I've gone there to help and develop, others and get involved in the market, that's helped me. It's given me a network of peers across the market in different industry sectors. I can learn from them. I can go to them for help and support, take that best practice, bring it into my firm. I'm on the Professional Services Marketing Forum now. We're going to host an event on AI, which of course is changing the sector already. That, again, for me will be a learning experience. It gives me the opportunity to speak to those at the forefront of what is going on in firms. So, again, I would completely reinforce what Rebecca said. I think networking in your market is really key for careers, and start as early as you can.
Yeah, brilliant advice. And Giles, we've mentioned it a couple of times already that within professional services, just because you become a manager, you don't necessarily manage people. And actually, leadership's often only associated with people that are people managers. How important do you think leadership is to people taking their next steps, and what qualities do you think that people need within that leadership side?
Yeah, I think. I think that leadership is relevant and important for all grades, at all levels in your career. And I think leadership does come in lots of different forms. So to your point, I don't think you have to be a manager of people to be a leader. I think leadership for me is about really the ability to influence and to lead a group or a team or a project towards achieving a goal. And actually, just listening to Rebecca, there, and Charlotte, just great insights around knowing your clients. The ability to influence and to deploy a range of different influencing styles, I think, is really, really important. And that, for me, is the big difference, I think, between a junior marketer and a manager. I think as a minimum, as a manager, whilst you may not be managing a team, at least as a new manager, you need to be able to manage projects, clearly. So the ability to sort of set the direction, motivate people, motivate partners, dare I say it, as well as sort of business services staff, is also really important, because you're motivating them towards sort of achieving, that project goal. I mean, that really, really is critical. And I think the other thing is, as a manager, people will be looking to you to lead by example. So there's a lot here about role modeling, and role modeling the right sorts of behaviors. So inspiring, motivating more junior members of the team is also a really important part, I think, of being a marketing manager.
And is that something that you teach people? But and we were talking about this before we came on. One of the things that's happened since COVID is obviously, excuse me, we're not in the office as much. You can't mirror people and see what they do. But is leadership something you can teach, or is it something you'd advise people watching how their peers do it?
Yeah, I mean, everyone learns differently, right? So you can learn, from a textbook. You can learn from others. You can learn through doing. These are the three typical ways that people learn. And for me personally, it's been learning from others, and watching people do this and do it really, really well in my 25 years. I've seen a lot of great leaders. I've seen some really bad leaders as well, and I've effectively sort of cherry-picked those particular approaches that work for me and feel authentic for me as well. I think authenticity is really important. Everyone does it differently. So I've certainly found that having strong mentors has made a huge difference to my career in terms of my development. Also, to Charlotte's point, can also be quite helpful when it comes to actually getting future roles in other organizations. So I would certainly encourage people to look for mentors.
I think that's really key.
Yeah.
I think that's really helpful. And quite a lot of the candidates we speak to will ask about mentors, or will talk about the mentors they've got. But I think if you've got someone that's, they don't even necessarily need to be associated with your company, but if you've got someone that you can go and talk to and get the advice from, it's invaluable. And then, Rebecca, if we come to you, one of the key things, I suppose, now is for the people that are listening and watching this, is how they can prepare to make the next step. So from your advice, what can these guys do to help themselves get ready for that next step?
I think, first of all, it's probably understanding what that means within the organization that you're in, or if you're looking for a new role to get your step up, understanding what that organization expects. I think there is first to be said is that job titles are just job titles. And I know we can all get hung up on them, but actually it's more about what you're actually delivering rather than what that role is. So if you're only after the manager role because it's the manager, make sure you probably reevaluate and think it through.
I definitely think LinkedIn plays a part in that. I think everyone seems to want LinkedIn people to see their next step. So if they're not manager, they want people outside the business to see it. And
I think, and actually I'm starting to notice it more. So, I have a team of mainly managers and senior managers. Our business is one of those weird ones that actually has a lot more senior people than junior people. I'm not saying that's right, just a caveat. But one of the things I've noticed is when we have people applying, potentially they may have a manager role on their CV, but actually when you look at their skill set of actually what they deliver and how they're delivering it, they're actually probably not what we would class as a true manager. So for me, I think it's my biggest advice is have a look at what a true manager is. What are the skills that a manager should be showing in the organization you're either in or that you're looking at. I also think it's really important to make your line manager or your HR team, however it works, aware that you are looking to move yourself up, and ask the question, what is it that this business looks for? What is it that skills that I should be showing? Ours actually is all done through our kind of appraisal process. We set objectives at the beginning of the year, which I'm sure most people do. But what I would expect on someone on my team that was looking for their next step up is that they're showing me the over and above. So they're showing me that they've absolutely nailed their job and they're going the extra mile and stepping up without actually having the job already. Because that to me is showing dedication to wanting to strive for improvement and to do the best. It's not just chasing whether that be a pay rise or a promotion. So it's definitely about making sure your manager is aware, definitely making sure that you start to pick up responsibility for things that you probably can't across every department, especially when we're all so busy. There are always things where, you know what, I would never say no if one of my team went, do you know what, could I pick that up? Or would you give me an opportunity to run with that? And it's really important to put yourself out there because one, it will help you develop those skills. Two, it gives you the opportunity to develop those skills without the accountability sitting on your head because you've got the ability to learn. And then you can really kind of start to showcase it. And then the next one is make sure that you're really prepared for your PDRs. If you are looking for that next step and you know that there is the opportunity to be promoted, you should be highlighting that at earliest, latest at that mid-year. And then at the end of the year, you should have really made all of that steps to go, this is how I showed that I went over and above. These are the skill set that I've covered. And this is why I have done this.
Yeah, really helpful. Thank you. And then Giles, within marketing, you can really focus on certain areas, and we've got obviously the digital, the bids. You've got client relationship as you do. What's your advice to people that are kind of getting to that point where should I focus or should I be more broad?
I mean, short answer, it really depends, Mark. I mean, it depends, I think, on what you enjoy doing most. Where you want your career to go, plus the type of firm, market, country you want to work in. That probably will determine to some extent whether you should sort of stay as a generalist or whether you should look to specialize and how quickly you should look to specialize. I mean, when I think about my career in MBD, it's sort of been that sort of classic sort of hourglass shape. So I sort of started off at the start of my career, working as a generalist in a practice BD role. I was in corporate, then I think I was in IP and TMT, getting a really good foundation, just as we've been discussing, across PR and marketing and BD, so the full mix, really sort of mastering my craft, if you like. And then I specialised in key account management at PwC, which I absolutely loved, and that really allowed me to sort of develop in-depth understanding of how to manage, how to grow large client relationships, beginning to really influence and touch revenue, and that to the day remains my real passion. But then I guess sort of latterly and more recently, as I sort of taken on more sort of senior leadership positions, I sort of broadened out again. So then if you're taking on a head of BD role, I've been able to draw on all those experiences that I've had sort of working in practice or sector roles, which actually I've found like really invaluable when I've been leading teams, because I have an insight, I have an understanding of what partners need, what the business needs. I have an appreciation of just how challenging but also really rewarding these roles can be. So sorry, that's a really long way of saying.
Nice.
I think spending some time getting exposure to all aspects of MBD, certainly for me, was a really good thing. So building out that broad skill set, and then it just gives you that base, and it gives you options. It means that doors aren't closed; they remain open. As to whether you can continue as a journalist or whether you ultimately end up specialising.
Yeah, and I think even if I add from a recruitment point of view, if you do go down one way or the other, it's not the end of the road to going back into a broader role. We quite often will have clients that will say, look, we're looking for a BD role, but if someone's in client relationship, we'll look at them, or if someone's in a dedicated bids role, we'll quite happily look at them. So just because you go down one route doesn't mean you can't get back out of that route if you like. And Charlotte, finally, so how can the junior marketers that are looking to step up, stay up to date with the industry trends and build their marketing knowledge? It's obviously really key to developing, because especially like you said earlier, when you're talking to partners and you've got short times, they need to know you understand what you're talking about. So what's the best way of them building their knowledge in that area?
I mean, I think there's a whole range of different ways. I mean, I know at Deckert, and I'm sure at many other firms, there are, they've got their own training platforms where they're teaching people internally about whether it's specific marketing skills, soft skills. There's also training on LinkedIn, which is actually very, very good. I think in order to keep up to the date with the market and what's going on, and I've mentioned this previously, networking, membership organisations such as PM Forum, Chartered Institute of Public Relations, they have their own, webinars, magazines, various different training programs. I think networking with your peers, being curious, asking questions about markets, sectors, clients, reading if there's something that you're not sure of, you want to learn more about. Me, it's AI, so I'm running an event on it because I want to learn about it. And asking questions of your colleagues. I genuinely think every day is a school day. There is an opportunity to learn from somebody around you, and they don't need to be senior to you. I mean, I'm a mentor and I learn from the people I'm mentoring because they have such different perspectives. So I just think there is a world of, information out there, and just be curious and tap into any resource you can.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think I'd echo that. The more you can do, there's no negative that comes from it. It's only ever going to help you. So listen, that kind of brings a close to the main questions we've got. And there's some fantastic insights from all three of you. So thank you so much. So I suppose that the last thing I would ask is, if you were going to give one bit of advice to these guys about their next step, and we'll start with you, Rebecca, what would your one bit of advice be?
Oh, I'm not very good at just doing one, am I? My one bit of advice. So probably my one bit of advice would be making sure that you are showcasing what you're capable of if you want to step up. I think that if you are one of those people that just gets on with your day job and just does it to a high standard, you'll get that tick box. But if you really want to step up, you need to showcase where you're going to add that value and where you're going to go above and beyond.
Perfect. Brilliant. Charlotte?
I would say look for opportunities where you can take on more responsibility. And I think both Giles and Rebecca have spoken about you need to be performing at that manager level already. Look for those opportunities. If somebody is going on holiday, can you step in and take some tasks off them and cover for them? If somebody's going on maternity leave, can you pick up things to help your boss and keep the team running efficiently? Running team meetings, managing a supplier. To Rebecca's point, if someone said to me they'd love to take on a little bit more work, brilliant. Let's that's going to develop their skills, fantastic. So look for those opportunities to take on more responsibility.
Fantastic. And then finally, Giles.
Well, probably not something that you as a recruiter would want to hear. I think
then don't say it, Giles.
I would say be patient.
Yeah.
And don't just sort of jump at the chance of moving firms, but a change in job title or putting more money on your salary. I think just be really clear about your motivation for moving, whether it's internally or externally. Look, it takes time, right, to develop capability and expertise, and actually it's much easier to do that in a firm where you've already got relationships, you've established a good reputation, and it will probably serve you well in the long run just to think before you necessarily leave.
Yeah, great bit of advice. So look, we've got a couple of minutes left. Just want to say massive thank you to Charlotte, Rebecca and Giles, who've been absolutely fantastic, giving some brilliant and hopefully really helpful to everyone, some advice there. We've got a few minutes left, so I'll pass over to Hannah because I think we've got some questions that have come in that we could run through, if that's okay.
Yes, we have. I'm just going through them now, actually. And one point I was going to sort of follow up with what you mentioned, Giles, as well, is that actually a lot of the conversations we have is around, giving advice to say, have you spoken to your manager? Have you discussed that and had that open communication around, what is it that you want to do in your next move? And a lot of the time it is organic. It is staying within, your current firm and seeing, and I think the advice we sort of sometimes mention is around being curious, asking the questions, as opposed to assuming and having assumptions around the fact that the opportunities aren't there. And again, just using like a lot of the points you raised today around communication, networking, managing expectations. I think that probably goes across all sectors and industries, but I think professional services in itself is very much around the stakeholder engagement and sort of working out how can I leverage my experience and making sure I am visible. So yeah, again, I think the advice piece as well is great because people on here will be able to sort of take that away. And they've also had questions come in, one of which is how do you win over a challenging stakeholder? So I know we did touch on this earlier, but I didn't know if anybody had a particular, experience or something that they could give a piece of advice around how you would deal with a challenging stakeholder, and then potentially little tactics. I don't know if anybody would like to pick that up.
I'm more than happy to. As Mark is aware, I have some very challenging stakeholders. I think the first bit of advice I can say with managing stakeholders is don't take it personally. I can say hand on heart, I used to take it so personally when I was probably more junior in my career, and it's not. Some of these people are just they're just this way. So when it comes to a challenging stakeholder, I think the biggest piece of advice and that I have learned, and still learning it to this day, is if you 100% believe in what you are saying and your strategy is right, let's say it's a brand strategy, for example, it's backed up in strategic fact. Don't let somebody who's challenging get you to change your mind because of the fact that they're just telling you you're wrong. I think there is something to be said in terms of sticking to what is true, what is the right thing to do, especially from a marketing perspective. And I know a lot of us work within industries where we probably are not surrounded by marketeers, and our senior management don't actually have marketing experience, even though they like to believe they do. And it's about making sure that if you can stay true to yourself and come across in a calm and passionate, if needed, way about that actually they'll respect you, even if it doesn't end up that way. And to work on it. It's one of those, a challenging stakeholder is not going to be won over overnight. It's taking it step by step, learning from each interaction you have with them, and going back to what both Charlotte and I have said is try and understand that person's psyche and work out, is there things you can change about the way you're going about your relationship that might make things a bit easier?
Yeah.
I think we also see that you're not going to win every partner over, but if you work with one and you do a really good job with them and they see that partner that is challenging sees what you've done for another partner, they quite often will come around you and suddenly go, well, if you can do that for them, you can do that for me. So they can start kind of interacting a lot more because they can see the success that you're having.
And I think also just pulling on both your points as well, Rebecca and Charlotte, earlier around that sort of preparation. So you're thinking around your stakeholders and preparing for how they interact. And sort of, I suppose it's a bit like you're watching, you're seeing, you're observing, seeing how they respond and how they're operating, so that so your success is or what you need to get out of that interaction with your stakeholder is going to be a success because you prepared for how to go about it. And sometimes, there are occasions where you thought, okay, that didn't go as well, but I can learn from that, and I can sort of, pick up and dust myself off and move on. And moving on to another quick question as well that we've had to come in. What's the most common mistake you see with candidates trying to step up to manager? Or it might be, again, something you've sort of, picked up in the market that we have at the moment. Sometimes it's market conditions, sometimes it's just in general around expectations of what a manager is. But I don't know if anybody has had, experience of that, and maybe the pitfalls of potentially trying to step up to manager. I don't know if anybody's experienced that or wants to comment.
I mean, I can chip in on that one. I think sometimes managers assume that as a manager they have the right to be at the table, and to be taken seriously as a business advisor. I think you have to earn the right. Doing all the things that we've been discussing this morning in terms of competence and credibility, and just doing a bloody good job. So I think that's one thing. I think also this assumption that, as a manager, you no longer have to deliver, you can just advise, is fatally flawed. Because ultimately, back to Charlotte's point around Barack Obama's sage advice, getting stuff done is what the job's about. So yes, the balance between advisory and execution will shift as a manager. But don't lose sight of the fact that we're here to deliver, we're here to execute. And then you can build up over time more of the advisory skills that will obviously bring even more value to your stakeholders and to your business. but don't assume I'm a manager. I can stop doing and I can start delegating, because it doesn't work like that. But I've seen too many people assume that that's what they should be doing as a manager, and they usually fail.
Yeah, and it sort of goes back to that sort of, you know, point around, you know, leading by example. And if you're not willing to do, you know, the elements that you expect your team to do, then again, you might then sort of, you know, pick up on bad habits, and then an expectation of what a manager is not necessarily going to be success, you know, across different industries. And then I think we've got time for a quick last one, just on a time watch. How do you know, so this is again coming in on the questions, how do you know if you're ready to be a manager? So that's quite broad, but I don't know, Charlotte, if you felt, Yeah,
I think if you, to my earlier point, if you're absolutely nailing your current role, if you're getting just exceptional feedback, if you are bored in your current role because you feel that you are now doing this at a standard and you've been doing it to that standard for a while, I think they are good indicators that you're probably ready for a step up.
and I think in general as well, it's you were sort of touching, Rebecca, around your team structure and the level that you expect there as well. There's kind of themes that emerge, isn't there, around what a manager is as well, and sometimes it differs depending. So I didn't know if you've had that experience in your industry in terms of real estate compared to legal, for example, because that's always quite an interesting one to compare industries.
Yeah, probably. I think, I mean, there's a lot of similarities. I think it's, the job is probably similar, whatever the industry is, but I think with real estate, I think we probably are we're closer to a more traditional marketing department than some. And I think it's all about making sure that you're thinking through those next steps and being really ready for it, and also not being ready for it thinking you're ready for it for the wrong reason. And I know I've done it a couple of times, but actually the responsibility that comes with stepping up to that manager level is a lot more than I think some people expect. I think they think, oh, it's a manager title, I get to go and, you know, boss people around or whatever. But going back to Giles's point, you know, you actually, whatever level you're at, still have to be prepared to get your hands dirty, as I call it. You know, I have had team on annual leave this week, and yesterday I was moving tables in a marketing suite. It's not all glam. It's not all glam. And I think that's the thing, is making sure that you realise that actually a lot of it is about taking on the accountability as well as being able to deliver the role. And you know what, you've got to make sure you're ready for that. And I definitely say, if it's a position of manager that includes people management, that you've really thought that through. People management is not easy. People management is not always fun. And it's also quite time consuming. So you can often go to a manager role and your responsibility and accountability will go up, but actually you're going to feel more stretched for time. So making sure that you are aware of that additional commitment to being able to manage your time better, potentially having less time to think through, and actually prepare yourself for, am I actually ready? Have I adapted to the right skill set to be able to handle? You can have some really awkward conversations when you're managing people, and that can be performance related all the way through to, you know, life related things happen. And actually there's a whole different skill set required if there's people management involved in that manager role as well.
Yeah, because I think that's a common sort of theme as well with those who have gone from, say, you know, a traditional senior executive but aren't managing anyone, and then expect to see okay, how do I go about man management as well? I think that's also a question that does crop up. But I didn't know if anybody did have an advice on that. If you are sort of looking and aspirationally wanting to man manage individuals, but maybe haven't got it, but maybe the next step they want to get to is people management. Is there any advice you give to those that are looking to take on man management?
I always get my team, if possible, to do what I would call man management light, which is if, for example, you've got interns coming into the business or you've got people on work experience, it's an opportunity to spend a short amount of time and a limited period having to be accountable for another person, to understand how you feel about that. Because actually it's a very different skill set to being able to manage projects. So I think that's probably another piece of advice, is when you're thinking about your step to manager, is your step to manager more about the management of projects or a particular business unit, or is it more about wanting to manage because you want to manage people, and then adapt yourself with the right skills for either which way you're going to go, or both if it goes the same way.
And I didn't know if Charlotte or Giles felt anything extra on that sort of people management side, if you haven't got that right now, if there's any advice you would offer.
Well, probably just to add briefly, I completely agree with the points. I think, if you do have as Rebecca said, an intern coming in, for example, I think her point is excellent. It's just that very limited scope of management of somebody to test it out and see if you like it. It is absolutely time consuming managing people. It can be very, it can be challenging. You are having, difficult conversations, but it can also be very, very rewarding. And that's certainly, my experience. So I've enjoyed it, but I think understanding yourself and whether that's something you like and you want to do. Colleagues of mine here at Dechert, they don't want to manage anybody. They're really happy focusing on doing that work. So it's just down to you, your personality type, the kind of career you want.
Yeah, and that goes back to having those conversations and communications and getting that feedback, I suppose, as well, to say, this is my assumption of what I'd like to be doing, but it'd be great to be able to speak to my manager around what do they feel and where's the career path and opportunity for me and my skills, and where there's gaps maybe for development as well. So I think, we're basically coming towards the end of the webinar. I didn't know if there's anything else anybody else wanted to cover, or any other points to raise off the back of our discussion today. I think we've covered quite a lot. So a final thank you to the panelists, to Charlotte, Giles and Rebecca. Thank you again for taking the time to discuss this topic with us. Really inspiring individuals, and we've only touched the surface of their insights today. And thank you again for joining us all who have logged in. Please feel free to send questions and any further feedback from today to us here at Carter Murray. And we very much look forward to joining us in the future. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.